You've been waking up later. Tasks feel heavier. You stare at the ceiling more than you used to, wondering where your motivation went. The dreams you used to chase, they now feel distant, like relics from a past life. And in those long, silent stretches where you do nothing, absolutely nothing, you begin whispering to yourself the dirtiest label our culture gives: lazy. But deep down, a quieter voice disagrees. It doesn't shout. It doesn't convince. It simply exists, like a subtle pulse underneath the noise, saying, something is shifting. You're not lazy. You're awakening. But awakening doesn't feel like a sunrise. It feels like a collapse. The scaffolding of ambition, the old desires, the societal scripts, you watch them dissolve one by one, like scaffolding falling off a building that was never truly yours to begin with. The energy that once made you jump out of bed now hides in the corners of your body. Your to-do lists sit untouched, and yet you're not numb. You're aware, almost too aware, because once your inner world starts whispering truth, your outer world starts to feel like a lie. There's a moment, usually in the quiet, when it hits. You look around your room, your job, your relationships, and you think, none of this is mine. You didn't choose this life, you inherited it. Inherited beliefs, inherited goals, inherited definitions of success that were handed to you like blueprints for a house you never wanted to build. And when you realize that, fully realize it, your system goes offline. It's not burnout. It's not depression. It's deconstruction. Because before a new self can rise, the false self must die. And that's what's happening to you right now. The version of you who once fit the mold, who strived, who pushed, who conformed is fading. And the stillness you're experiencing is not laziness, it's grief. You're mourning a self that no longer serves you, and grieving takes energy. A kind of energy our world never learned to value. You've spent your entire life being rewarded for productivity, for performing, for achieving, and now, when you finally pause to breathe, to question, to simply be, the world calls it failure. But you are not failing. You are waking up to the truth that so much of what you were told to want was never yours to begin with. Maybe you used to be the high achiever, the go-getter, the one people envied because you always had a plan. But now, every plan feels like a trap. You've lost your fire, not because you're broken, but because your soul refuses to set itself on fire for a life that doesn't align anymore. And here's the paradox no one talks about. The more conscious you become, the more exhausted you feel. Not because you're weak, but because awareness is heavy. You start noticing the inauthentic conversations, the subtle manipulation, the empty rewards. You hear the hollow clang of applause that once felt like purpose. You feel the emptiness underneath the chase. And that weight, that isn't laziness. That's the cost of consciousness. Because when you awaken, you don't just see the world differently, you feel it differently. Deeper, sharper, louder. You walk into rooms and notice energy shifts others don't. You start picking up on your own subtle betrayals. The smile you fake, the enthusiasm you force, the consent you give just to keep peace. And suddenly, all of it becomes unbearable. Your system starts rejecting the old programming. And like a body detoxing from a poison it was trained to rely on, you crash. You lose interest. You lose momentum. But you don't lose yourself, you begin to meet yourself, possibly for the first time. This meeting doesn't look glamorous. It looks like crying on the kitchen floor because you can't find a reason to reply to another email. It looks like staring at a blank journal page, wanting to write your purpose but feeling like you forgot how to want. It looks like sleeping too much and still waking up tired. But let me tell you this. The cocoon doesn't look like flight. It looks like stillness. And you, my friend, are in the cocoon. Everyone loves the idea of transformation, until they realize it means becoming nothing for a while. You don't just get new wings. You dissolve. Your old identity doesn't go quietly. It will try to pull you back with guilt, with fear, with the echo of expectations. You'll hear it say, "You're wasting time." But time spent unbecoming what you are not is never wasted. You'll hear it say, "You used to be better." But the old better was built on survival. This new you is built on truth. You'll be tempted to perform again, to chase again, to prove that you're still valuable, that you're still worthy. But proving is a symptom of forgetting. And you are remembering now. You are remembering that your worth was never tied to how much you produce. That your value isn't determined by how well you perform exhaustion. That your brilliance doesn't need to shine for others to see. It just needs space to be. And in that remembering, something begins to return. Not the frantic energy of hustle culture. Not the dopamine hits of shallow praise. But a steadier pulse. A quieter fire. Not the spark of ambition, but the warmth of alignment. Because what you're doing isn't nothing. It's everything. You are rewiring your relationship to self, to time, to energy, to desire. You are learning to move from authenticity instead of obligation. You are no longer motivated by fear of being left behind, but by love for who you are becoming. So no, you're not lazy. You are sacredly paused. And in this pause, your truth is gestating. Not everyone will understand. Some will call it regression. Others will call it giving up. Let them. You don't owe the world an explanation for your transformation. You are not here to meet their timelines. You are here to meet your soul. And your soul moves slowly. You begin to feel it one morning, not as a lightning bolt, not as a grand idea, but as a soft, almost imperceptible shift. It might arrive through a quiet refusal. You don't open your inbox the second you wake up. You don't force yourself to smile when your insides feel hollow. You just breathe. And for a flicker of a moment, you remember what stillness without shame feels like. The world hasn't changed, but your response to it has. That's how you know the inner architecture is rebuilding itself. Not through noise, but through silence that doesn't scare you anymore. You used to need chaos to feel alive. Now, peace begins to pulse beneath your skin like a second heartbeat you'd forgotten was always there. But this doesn't mean you suddenly become motivated again in the way you used to define it. The old version of motivation, the one fueled by fear, approval, adrenaline, and urgency, no longer belongs to you. It feels like trying to wear a jacket from a decade ago. It doesn't fit, and pretending it does only suffocates you. Now, you're learning a new kind of drive, one that doesn't shout but guides. Not urgency, direction, not force, flow. This kind of drive doesn't begin with a task list. It begins with a question. What feels true today? Not what looks impressive, not what others expect, not what gets applause. Just truth. And sometimes that truth is, rest is the most radical act I can choose right now. Just jarring at first. This realization that alignment is often invisible. That becoming yourself doesn't always come with fireworks or announcements. Sometimes it comes through cleaning your space with intention, drinking water slowly, answering a message when you genuinely feel ready, watching the sunset instead of filming it, because now you don't want to be seen as much as you want to feel seen by yourself. The collapse taught you something the world never did. Stillness is not a void. It is a mirror. And in that mirror, you finally started recognizing the person you were always meant to become. But don't romanticize the awakening too quickly. There are days you will want to go back. Days you will crave the structure of the old world. The deadlines, the dopamine rush of doing what you were supposed to do. You'll catch yourself missing the praise, the pace, the illusion of certainty. And you'll wonder, was I stronger back then? But no, you were just busier. You were running so fast from yourself that exhaustion felt like accomplishment. And now, the work you're doing is deeper than anything you've ever done. You're relearning how to trust your own rhythms. To move when you're ready, not when you're afraid. To build without betraying your nervous system. That's a kind of strength the world can't measure. Eventually, you notice how your body is your compass. How your chest expands when something is aligned. How your shoulders curl inward when you say yes out of guilt. You begin calibrating your life, not by the rules of capitalism or the grind, but by sensation, by intuition, by integrity. It sounds poetic, but it's messy too. They'll start to say no more. First, your voice will tremble. People will be confused, maybe even angry. You'll disappoint some. You'll lose others. But the space they leave behind becomes fertile ground. And in that soil, a different kind of relationship can grow, one rooted not in performance, but in presence. You used to think boundaries were walls. Now you see their bridges to the truest version of you. And something wild starts to happen. The fog begins to lift, not all at once, but in ribbons. You catch yourself doing something you love, not to prove anything, but because it pulls joy from a place so deep inside you, you forgot it was ever there. Maybe it's painting, maybe it's cooking, maybe it's simply staring at the sky and not apologizing for being unproductive while doing it. And the more you listen to that quiet inner voice, the louder it becomes. Not with words, but with knowing. And that knowing becomes your North Star. It starts guiding decisions that used to terrify you. You begin choosing people who don't drain you. You let go of spaces where your presence was tolerated, not treasured. You stop asking, "Is this good enough?" and start asking, "Does this feel real?" That's the shift. Because the truth is, you never lacked discipline. You lacked alignment. Your laziness was not a character flaw. It was a refusal. A sacred rebellion against a life that asked you to abandon yourself every single day. Now, you're not just waking up, you're returning to your body, to your essence, to your breath. You no longer ask, "How can I do more?" You ask, "What can I do less of, so I can finally hear myself again?" This version of you doesn't need loud validation. It craves quiet resonance. The kind that sits with you in the still moments and says, This is what you came here to be." Some people won't understand your softness, your slowness, your refusal to hurry. That's okay. You didn't awaken to impress. You awakened to remember. And what you're remembering is this. Your life is not a project to fix. It's a field to tend to, a garden to grow. It requires sunlight, water, time, and rest. Especially rest. Because rest isn't what you do when you've earned the right to exist. It's what you offer yourself because you already do. You no longer wake up with panic, but you still wake up with questions. What now? How do I live in a world that's still sprinting when I've learned how to walk with soul? You've rebuilt your interior, quietly, slowly, without applause. But the outer world hasn't changed. It's still asking for speed, for certainty, for masks. And now, the real challenge begins. Holding your softness in a world that has forgotten how to be still. Because this isn't just a spiritual shift. It's a relational one, practical one. It affects how you work, how you love, how you show up. The people around you may not understand why you don't push yourself like you used to, why you're no longer interested in proving your worth through output. They'll say, "You've changed," and they'll be right. But change doesn't need approval. It needs integration. And integration begins with choices, not grand, performative ones, but small, consistent ones. Like choosing not to respond immediately to the pressure. Like walking away from conversations that drain you. Like honoring your body's need to pause, even when the world insists you should keep going. You're not here to win a race. You're here to come alive. So you start reshaping your life. Not all at once, but breath by breath. You look at your calendar and ask, which of these commitments reflect my truth, and which reflect my fear of being forgotten? You look at your relationships and wonder, which ones expand me, and which ones ask me to shrink? The answers don't always come easy, but they come. And here's the hardest part. Some of what you once called ambition was actually trauma in disguise. Some of what you once called motivation was just your nervous system trying to outrun shame. And now that you've paused long enough to feel your actual desires, you see how much of your old life was built on survival. Not on joy, not on purpose, not on truth. That realization stings. But it also liberates. Because now you're free to build something that fits. A life designed not for performance, but for presence. You stop chasing success and start cultivating fulfillment. You stop obsessing over goals and start listening for callings. One feels like pressure, the other like peace. You begin to act, not react. And that action, though slower, is precise. It's infused with clarity. You write not to prove you're talented, but because something inside you wants to be said. You create not for likes, but for resonance. You serve not for praise, but because it feels like alignment in motion. This is the paradox. When you stop trying to be valuable, your value becomes undeniable. Because people can feel it. The depth, the groundedness, the absence of desperation. There's no grasping in your presence, only gravity. That's what healing does. Changes your frequency. And as your frequency shifts, so does your environment. You'll notice that certain people stop calling. Some opportunities quietly dissolve. Don't chase them. Let them fall away. They belong to a version of you that needed to be busy to feel important. That version did its best, but you've outgrown it. Now you attract resonance, not chaos. You magnetize what mirrors your new rhythm. And yet, the mind will occasionally whisper old fears. What if I fall behind? What if I never catch up? What if I lose everything? Breathe. Those are echoes. They are not your truths. The world you're building may not be linear, but it will be real. And the truth is, you're not behind, you're ahead. Because you're not chasing the illusion anymore. You're building the root system others never see. The integrity, the stillness, the emotional intelligence, the nervous system that doesn't break under pressure. You're not climbing ladders, you're planting forests. You don't need more hustle. You need more honesty. And that honesty shows up in how you speak to yourself when you fall short, in how you hold yourself when doubt creeps in, in how you stop making your worth conditional on your productivity. It also shows up in your relationships, because the more whole you become, the less you tolerate what once passed as love. You no longer crave roller coasters. You crave reverence, depth, stillness in another's presence. Not the kind that's quiet because it's empty, but the kind that's quiet because it's safe. You don't need to be entertained. You want to be met. That's what this awakening gives you. The ability to discern, to feel the difference between attention and attunement, between noise and nourishment, between urgency and truth. And from that discernment, your life begins to take shape, not in the image of who you should be, but in the likeness of who you already are. You build a routine not to control yourself, but to support your becoming. You pursue goals not to prove you're enough, but to express your purpose. You rest not as a reward, but as a responsibility. And slowly, your days begin to align. Your calendar reflects your values. Your friendships reflect your depth. Your work reflects your soul. Not because it's perfect, but because it's true. So if you're here, somewhere between the collapse and the rebuild, know this: you're not behind. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're healing. You're becoming. You're awakening. And that is the most powerful work you will ever do.